to the Dignity Dialogue with your host, Joe Kittinger.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Dignity Dialogue. I am Joe Kittinger. I'm going solo here. It reminds me of the 10 o'clock news local when they go and April is out on vacation. So April's normally with us. She's out today. So I'm handling it solo, but we're going to have a wonderful conversation because we have an amazing guest. Megan Gluth-Bohan is the CEO of TRI out on the West Coast. Now, is that Washington, Oregon? Because when you're from Wisconsin, you're just from the West Coast. There's California, and then we get confused. Okay?
I totally get it.
Okay, so
I'm in Washington.
Washington, so you're way up there.
That's right.
You're way up there in God's country of, and we perceive Washington as kind of rainy and damp and huge trees that you can drive through.
You know, you're not totally far off. It is probably, I think that there's a statistic somewhere that we get less rain here every year than Houston, Texas gets. But we get it in the winter when other places are getting snow, and it comes down as more of a manageable rain rather than sort of a flooding deluge.
Well, Megan, everyone, is the owner and CEO of TRI, which is a $118 million company and growing. And the reason I bring that up is because that's not easy to do. That's really difficult to do. And the reason I bring that up is because our little Dignity Dialogue, which probably has a handful of thousands of viewers, if that, I don't even know, because we started not that long ago. Megan reaches out to me, and the first question I asked her was, why would a CEO owner of a $118 million company want to be on the Dignity Dialogue? And your humility and your authenticity and your beauty as a human being, it was just like you had me at hello with your energy, and you have a story to tell. And so I think I just want to pass it off to you, and let's just see where this goes, because I can't wait to hear more of the story.
Yeah, Joe, I think you and I are sort of after the same thing in the world right now. And I don't think we're alone. I think we're starting to see, some people will use the word awakening. I don't even know if that's the word I would use, but there's definitely something happening. And there's something happening within my space too, right? Within what we might want to call the corporate and business world, of people who seek to connect not only with the people they work with, but sort of the broader landscape. And so it's been an intention of mine in the last several months to reach beyond just simply the people I do business with and kind of take my light into other places as well, while still being fully present here too. And that's a bit of a task, but I definitely think you and I are sort of up to the same thing.
We were up to the same thing, and we got to it in completely different ways.
That's right. That's right.
I got to it in a family that adored me. I was the youngest of 5. I was the most talented and most attractive. Okay. I was totally a mama's boy. I had a father who was sensitive. He was in sales. I then got into sales, and I would hear stories from these old timers that said, your father saved my company. You know, I'm like, what? He sold television. And this one guy goes, I know, I had this fledgling radio station. And I remember I used to walk by this radio station. It was out of a house. And when I go to school, he said, I was about to go under. And your father said, while I'm selling TV, I'll sell a bunch of ads for you too. And he goes, and he didn't get a lick of commission. He just did it because he was so connected in the community. And I heard these, and he was a humble guy. He would never preach that. He just did it. And so I was raised with very lovely parents, and who taught me dignity through their actions, never preached, and allowed me to be creative and free to explore life and being an entertainer. They introduced me to performance and being on stage and having confidence in front of people. And then I discovered dignity because it felt really good. And my mother made everyone feel so special, and same with my dad, but she was the personality that I wanted to keep spreading that light to the world. Mm-hmm. And that's how I got here. So How did you get here?
You know, it's interesting because You say that, and it's so funny how different our paths are, but I'm now even more convinced that we are sort of standing in similar spots. I grew up in probably definitely not your story. There were certainly some really, really amazing parts of my upbringing. I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in a small town. And some of the upsides to that are, for anybody who's listening who is from the Midwest, there's just something idyllic. And really, there's some really strong cultural values there that make being from the Midwest a really positive thing. And so I grew up at a time and in a place where we didn't really feel pressure from the outside world. We didn't really feel the acceleration of technology maybe as fast as other places. I joke now with my teammates because I'm not very technologically inclined, and I say, well, that's because I grew up in the land that time forgot. But but there was some really deep, rich elements to that experience, and at the same time, my family did not have. We were below the poverty line, and we did not have maybe all of the sort of gifts that a lot of other families have. And I try to be really not so much diplomatic, but really caring in the way I talk about that, because I certainly don't mean to throw any human being sort of on the pier, the fire pyre for that. But definitely, I have some things in my background and in my story. I describe it. I say if you take the ACEs test, the Adverse Childhood Experiences test, I have quite a few of those in my childhood. And so for me, I knew at a very young age that that there were certain elements of my upbringing that were pretty cool. But there were probably a lot of elements of that upbringing that made me know at a deep level that I didn't want this when I was a grown up. And so that was one of my first most motivating feelings, is saying, I don't know exactly what I want to be when I grow up or where I want to go, but I know that I don't want this. And that's been really powerful in my life. And what happened is that I had a really long and winding path through a lot of really dark places. I'm very open about the fact that I didn't know at a young age how to process what I felt, and I didn't know how to process what was happening around me. And so I very early on engaged in and I say early on because it was early then. Now I think we hear about kids getting involved in drugs and alcohol way earlier than I did. But I left high school, and by that time was fully sort of entrenched in the use of alcohol and drugs to sort of cope with things that I couldn't have articulated to you then. Even I wouldn't have had words for that. And that ended up getting me in a position where I was kicked out of college when I first went. Which, by the way, it was a tremendous achievement to even be in college. You know what I mean? That was a huge thing that if you were to look at me on paper as a kid and say, is this a college-bound student? Like, maybe not. I wasn't a terrible student, but I had a lot of circumstances and a lot of financial reasons why that wouldn't make a lot of sense. And I blew it, Joe. I absolutely blew it because I couldn't prioritize my studies. I couldn't follow sort of the dignified path for a person. And so it took me a long time to, after being kicked out of school, you're not necessarily then just going to apply someplace else and go. You have to prove to another educational institution that they should accept you and take you. So for me, that was about a 7-year journey to get a college degree. And I did. I got a college degree from the University of Minnesota. And that was a big deal for me to have that because, again, I had to have quite a comeback story. But I wasn't coming back to self. I was coming back good enough to get into school, but I was still pretty deeply entrenched in a lot of habits and patterns that don't lend themselves to somebody who's, going to be successful or cope well with life. And I got into law school, which is what you do when you graduate with a degree in history and you don't want to teach. I took the LSATs and I was like, well, I guess this is what I'm doing. But I didn't have a goal, Joe. I didn't think like, oh, this is what I want to do. I needed to do the next indicated thing. And a little bit before law school started, I learned that I didn't have the financial aid package that I needed to go. And I didn't have, obviously, the familial support to get it done. And a friend of mine's dad co-signed on my student loans for law school. I always tell that story. I tell it because I'm very, very open about the fact that that guy changed my life. He altered the direction of my entire life because he co-signed on a somewhat unknown kid who probably wasn't demonstrating a lot of real signs of confidence, maybe. I don't know. But he changed my life. And he told me, someday when you're in the position to do this for someone else, I want you to do it. And I think he told me that because he wanted to motivate me. But I think he also told me that because he knew that I would know one day how good that felt to enrich somebody else. And I've never forgotten that. And he passed away a few years ago, and I told his wife and children, like, you know, he changed my life. He absolutely did.
That is absolutely amazing.
And that's an important experience. It's a super important experience.
I think it's a great reminder that no matter what your upbringing, we need people to pack our parachute sometime.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to say, I believe in you. Now you have to believe in me and jump.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, I've just mentioned that gentleman jokingly about my mentor and that lesson he taught me. That's Dave Scogan. You know, he was my business mentor. You know, I had a great mom and dad, right? But they weren't business people. You know, they didn't have that. And I'm starting a business and he's my account, or he's my client, right? Well, the only reason he's my client is because we fell in love with each other as people, right? And he's gave me a shot. And we need those people. And there were so many of those folks. You know, I'm sure you've had even more that have lifted you up. And I think when you think about dignity, to honor and respect someone, to be of honor, is to see the honor in you. So he saw your worthiness. Now,
yes,
your
I think
true
so.
worthiness. He saw your potential. Worthiness for most people is potential because they haven't stepped into it yet.
That's right.
Right. And
That's
so
right.
we work to impress people. We work to impress. And when you discover your worthiness, you realize, oh, now I'm working to support. I'm working to support and help. I don't have to impress.
That's right. That's right. But I think that's life's work in some sense, Joe. Like, I don't know if I'll speak for myself because I'm loath to speak for anyone else in the world, but I think I'm constantly, like, a person's worthiness, like my own, I'm constantly doing that work with myself.
Yeah.
And I have to do that work more earnestly than most of the people in my life because of the responsibilities that I have. It's an achievement, and it's a long story for how you get to from a small town in Iowa under the poverty line to where I'm at today. And all of that was super hard fought. And it was also on the shoulders and backs and with the assistance of so many amazing people. But at the core of all of it is this, the core of keeping all of it is in my work, is in making sure that I am consistently keeping myself tuned up to my own worthiness. And that is something, I will be super, super honest, that is something that I'm not sure that's a place I'm ever going to arrive in and sit and say, okay, I know this. I always know this. I don't have to work on this anymore.
Yeah.
But what's cool about it is that because I consistently need to do that for myself, I also can help other people do it for themselves too. And I'm very keen and I have my eyes open at all times for people who might need my boost or a parachute from me.
Yeah.
And I think that's neat too.
Absolutely. We're never fully cooked.
No.
We're always working on ourselves. We're never done. As soon as you think you're done, just go interview a few people and they'll tell you where you're not done. Right?
Exactly. Exactly. Yes.
Oh, you know what's so interesting? You know, you talk about battling, you know, just with worthiness, and that just that attention to detail, which really is attention to this detail, like not to forget that. We had an executive we worked with. He's part of executive team, and I was unpacking his purpose. So our gift is to give people credit for what they do because of who they are, and because few people have ever done that. And so now we're pointing out the worthiness, and he told me that his father took his life when he was 18. Now the gentleman is probably in his late 30s, And he said, "You're the first person I've ever told that."
Wow.
And he just started to weep. And I'm like, wow. I mean, I was honored to be the first person. And I said, but people didn't know your father passed? He goes, my high school buddies did, but if I went to college, they told the story. I never did. You know, so everyone spoke on it. And he said, one sister, I wasn't really close to her, but when we were unpacking this, she goes, who's going to walk me down the aisle? And she said, well, you? And he goes, and he just started to weep. And I go, and you did walk her down the aisle, didn't you? And he goes, yeah. What's beautiful is he was a very matter-of-fact speaker. Okay, like, no, my way, and just not cooperative. But when I looked at his dignity, and I showed him the dignity, like traits and stuff, I go, you're really wired actually to help and be out there. And I just heard from a different executive from the company saying, oh, what's really cool is he stood in front of his group and told about his father and how he took his life. And he goes, and my father did the same thing. And I was like, oh my gosh. He goes, he's just starting to communicate and be open, like everything is collaborative more. Right? And when we bottle this stuff up, it really is around worthiness. When we bottle it up, and that's why I always tell folks, if you want to better a role, stop this leadership training and traditional stand. You know, you don't need leadership training how to manage a spreadsheet. You need to better the person, and they will better the role.
Yes. Yes. But I think that we have to be mindful about how scary that is, especially when you are, I guess I'll use a sort of traditional term here, although I know a lot of organizations aren't this way anymore. But the further you are up the ladder, I think the harder it is to open that up a little bit. The higher you go, the thinner the oxygen in the air.
Yeah.
And the more lonely it is. That is all very true.
Yeah.
And there's fewer and fewer beings within that same organization that don't need something from you. And I say a lot of times that the single greatest gift or responsibility, I guess, depending on how, ask me out on any given day what it is, but that I have to my team is stability and a sense of strength and just being stable and really, really firm and solid. And I think that I'm not alone in that feeling. So then you have a lot of leaders who feel that at various places of leadership in their life. And then they think, well, is there any room within that for me to be a human being with sort of these places within me that might feel really sort of dark or hurt or wounded, for lack of a better word? And I think that there is. And I think, to your point, things change when we start to see that, and when we start to bring that out and we start to get honest about that. But I can understand why that's terrifying, and it certainly has been for me at various points too.
I'm imagining, just because I'm a complete stranger. Well, not anymore. We're not strangers anymore, Megan. We spent a couple times together now. We're friends, but to be able to reach out like you are, right? To a stranger, right? Almost it's probably easier than your own executive team, right? Because I don't know you, you don't know me.
Yes.
That's why, stylists become, we used to own a hair salon. That's a totally different story. But my wife goes, wow, it's like a therapy center in here.
It's true.
They tell everything. It could be a brand new patient. They're telling you about an affair, or they're telling you about this stuff that went on. But my question for you is, does your company know your story?
Yes.
Or do they only know it because of their listening to podcasts?
No, they know. They know it from me. It's a key part of what I do. And we've had such rapid accelerated growth that I find myself having to tell the story more often, so that the new people come in and understand that who I am is sort of this is what's going to motivate the culture, and this is what's going to be happening around here. That has never gotten easier for me, ever. And it's interesting that you raise the point that it's often easier to do that with people that we don't know as well, because it's 100% true. At this moment in my life, I am working on learning to be a person that is really, really open in my weakness when I need something. And I have no problem doing that if my or I did before, honestly, but I'm getting better at being like, my steak isn't cooked right. I come from the Midwest. When the steak is put down in front of you, you eat the steak. Okay.
Right.
But like I'm learning, I'm learning to say, hey, listen, I said medium
Yeah.
and this is medium rare, right? That is much easier than me going to the people in my life right now that are closest to me and saying, I'm hurting and I need a hug. And I want to say that because I'm sort of at this place in life where I can say that, but I also want to be super, super honest about that. Because if I'm not honest, then I can't help anybody with that, and I can't, put that out there. But you're absolutely right that that's sort of a learned skill, and it's one that I'm still learning. And you're right, it's way easier to do that with people we don't know. But I force myself to do it with my team because it's important there.
When you say with your team, you're doing that with your executive team.
No, everybody in my company.
How many people?
We will be about 50 people by the end of the year this year. I started doing it when we were a group of 26. And I pretty much just have continued as we've grown.
So when you do that with these 50, 60 people, what do you think is the result of that from their perspective? What do you think they receive when they hear that, you didn't have it so easy?
First of all, I think I cease to become a title and I become a person.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my goal. I really want them to know that I'm a human being with them. And so I think that's the first objective in talking to them. And I think that's met every time. I always start that way because then I usually do it at our all company meeting. And I ask them then to pull from themselves in an honest way about the things that they need to work on, particularly at work. We're not a family, we're a community. And so I don't need to have all of your things that you need to work on here, but the things that you do or don't do that affect the community, we need to be honest with ourselves about what that is. And then we need to essentially improve upon that, transform it. And I don't ask them to share with the whole group, but I ask them to get into a place where they can be at least honest with themselves. And I find that they can do that much, much more effectively if I've done that for them first.
Yes. You're saying it's okay not to be perfect.
100%. And further, I'm saying I have days where I don't know that it's okay to not be 100% perfect. And in that way, John P. employee, I'm just like you.
Exactly. We're all humans. I just have a different role in the company.
That's right.
So I have different responsibilities. And I have different obligations than you have.
That is correct.
I always tell people, if anything happens to our company, you lose a job and I lose everything.
That is 100% true.
And I am I try to be clear with that, it's not an arrogant thing. It's just like to help a perspective. Like, let's have empathy with each other. This thing doesn't work. You can go find another job. I got to spend the rest of my life bailing myself out of debt.
I think, Joe, that's so important for an employee to hear, but it's even more important for those of us who own the company to hear. The amount of times that I'm tempted to allow subpar behavior to slide for longer than it should, or the amount of times I'm tempted to have my sort of empathy override my better prudent business judgment. I do well to remember that they might lose a job in this situation, but if I don't keep a tight ship, I will lose everything. And I think sometimes I don't even think that's selfish, because if you lose everything and I lose everything, then it's not just one person out of a job. It's, in my case, 50.
Yep.
And that is problematic. And if we forget that, I don't even think that's arrogance. I think that's just prudent.
It's truth.
To remember that. Yes.
Is prudent truth? I don't use that word very often.
I interchange prudence and sensibility, but yes, truth. There's some truth and sensibility for sure.
I was with so there's this one company where they said they're going into this different type of way they're going to organize. Okay, they're a big company, now they're trying to reorganize a certain way. And then there's people who go, I disagree, and I disagree, right? You have all these folks. And so I had to go around to the company and basically speak truth. And and this can be something anyone out there, just in speaking candor with people, saying, do you agree that being a great leader is being a great follower? And no one disagrees with that. Would you agree that integrity is doing the right thing at the right time? Would you agree with that? Yes. Are you cashing the check that this company is sending you? Yes. So, thinking about integrity, do you have a right to disagree with what the president wants to do? Do you have a right to question and ask questions? Absolutely, if it's to understand, but not if it's to push back.
Yeah.
And to have these candid conversations, Megan, it sinks in. Maybe because I'm on the outside, it's not like I'm an employee of the company, right? I'm just this facilitator dude that comes in to speak truth on dignity. That's how you dignify the company TRI. Okay, how you dignify Megan is this way. How you dignify my company, our company, is by hitting these initiatives, by getting after your stuff, by aligning your team, by all the things we have to do.
Yes.
That's how you dignify this
value.
company.
100%. We have a core value here, but we have a lot of values, but we kind of distill it down into just a few. But one of them is candor. And part of that is because I am a pretty simple, plain spoken, and don't spend a lot of time dancing around it. I believe that I owe them just the way it is, the truth, and I tell it. And I think people all, whether they admit that or not, I think they like that. And I think people like to be led that way. But one of the other things I say is I'm not looking for your agreement. I am looking for your alignment.
Yes.
So you don't have to agree, but you will get aligned. And that's to your point. I joke with them a lot and say, I like you all so much, but if we weren't getting paychecks, we probably wouldn't know each other. And I think it's something to remember, that like we're here for this purpose and we're doing this thing, but ultimately I own this. And we're going to get aligned, and you're going to know my character well enough to know that I'm going to try and make decisions that are in the best interest of you and everybody else here. But the number one objective is the profitability of this enterprise.
Yes.
And that is the objective. And you're right. Sometimes you just have to say this is happening. And if you don't like it, then that sounds like a you problem.
It is.
Not a me problem.
You're a volunteer.
That's right.
Right? It's a volunteer organization. I love how you said this is a community, not a family. I wrote that down because I've always struggled with, we work with many size businesses, but certainly a lot of family businesses, literally, right? Mom and dad and the kids, and then you got 50 people and you're running a meat shop, a real successful meat company. But even if they're not, they'll use this thing as a family. And I always struggled with that because I would say, well, if we're saying we're a family, we know about 40% of people had really shitty families, like maybe even higher than that. So that's even a dirty word right there. And if you're saying we're going to be like a family, well, their family of origin is argumentative,
Yep.
And how do you fire a family member?
That's right.
I'm born into the family member. So I really like the idea of we're a community.
That came off of my desire to have a really warm environment, but not smothering, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I don't want people to feel like this is a family, because first of all, depending on your family, like there's some expectation that you can't get kicked out of the family, to your earlier point. Here, this is at-will employment, and we are united. We care for one another. We are a team. We use the word team a lot here. But we're a community, and this community exists together, and we are united around common objectives. But also it helps them understand my role too. I had one of my first jobs in a law firm, I had a female law partner say to me, "Don't put a candy dish on your desk. You're not their grandmother. You're not asking anybody to come in and sit on your lap and have a Werther's original with you." And you know what? She was right. And it caused me to think a lot about my own role within these places that I work. Again, family versus community. So I don't have candy on my desk, Joe, and I don't run my business like we're a family.
Yeah.
And to your point, we might be dysfunctional if we were, so we'll just avoid that if possible.
Well, it creates more clarity. There's not an unclarity with family,
That's right. That's right.
right?
That's right.
So, okay, I'll explain this to everyone. You and I explained this to you a little bit last time we spoke, but the idea of always kids and Bucker kids, remember that? So I want to explain
Yes.
it to the audience because they may not know what that is. Always kids, hi. Always, always kids do what their parents always did. And I'm talking, my parents went to Disney once a year with a little bit of money they got from a residual thing that from grandpa's business. And we went to Disney once a year. And so I brought my girls to Disney once a year. My parents, we camped because they were very conservative. So I had to camp, and they RV'd, and I want an RV, even though Danica doesn't really want an RV. So that's an always kid. Now, there's certain things I had to buck. I had to buck the idea of money because I'm an entrepreneur. They weren't. So I had to look at money differently than they looked at money. So that's a bucker thing. But then there's ultra buckers, mother buckers, which Megan is. Now, a mother bucker is a very powerful person because a mother bucker has to look at the program they've been given, and then at a very young age decide this isn't for me. Like, I don't even belong in this world. Like, I just feel like it's not it. So now what the bucker has to do is have a period of pain they have to walk through. You explained your period of pain, and that's where you had to hit the lowest of the low and realize, what the hell am I doing? That's not what I want for my life. So then now you have to rewrite the program and create your new values, your new rules, and then start living those rules. So my question to you, Megan, was two questions. Number one, at what age approximately, and maybe you said I don't really remember, but was your bucker moment, that moment when you looked around and went, holy shit, what the hell's going on here? I will not be doing this. That's the first question. Number two, as you were going through that transition period of the low of the lows, what was it that was the first upward draft, so to speak? Because every bucker can usually explain that to me.
I can't tell you when I first knew that this wasn't for me, but I can tell you that I always knew this wasn't for me.
Fair.
And so you can do what you want with that. I just knew. I will also say, for the benefit of the other buckers out there, that this stream of going through it and then coming up, mine looked a lot more like a set of Jaws waves, like it was pretty rolling. But one of my lowest moments in my life is, I had lost my, later on in law school, I married, and I had a civil union with my first wife. And while I was in law school, she was diagnosed with cancer, and it ended up being terminal. And she passed away soon after I graduated from law school. And I moved out of the Midwest pretty quickly thereafter and came to the West Coast and began a descent into probably, I look at it now and I go, of course, that makes sense. That's what you do when you're grieving and you don't have good skills. But I really was just on like a life bender. I was really deep in an alcohol addiction. I was really deep in depression, and just in a terrible spot. And they say it's not rock bottom if there are no rocks, right? And I had quite a few rocks, but I ended up, a few years after her death, meeting somebody else. And she's amazing. And she said to me, I really like you, but I won't be doing this, whatever this is that you're going to do. And I called my aunt and uncle are longtime sobriety holders, and I called them and said, I think I have a problem, and I think that I need to get help. And I will never, for as long as I live, forget my very first Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. And I mark that as a real turning point in my life. And my wife, I married that girl who told me to knock it off. And we've been together now for almost 13 years. But she said to me just the other day, if you hadn't done that, you'd have never done any of this. All of this doesn't exist, including me and these beautiful children. And so for me, that was a really pivotal moment. I will tell you this, though, it was really ugly. And I think that's something that's really important for people to know and hear and get, that your most beautiful moment is also probably going to be some of your most ugly. And that's okay. I'm grateful for that now. I couldn't say it on day one, but I can say that now. I'm super grateful for those ugly moments that have turned into some of the most beautiful experiences of my life. But I think that's it.
When you renovate the house and you find out now you got to replace the plumbing and you rip some more walls, now the electrical has to be replaced.
Yes.
And then you put it all back together and now the rooms are bigger, they're more spacious, the ceiling is higher, it's updated, and you're like, huh. This is what I've become now.
That's right.
So you're in a renovation project.
I am, and I still am. I'm at a crux point in my life right now, as a matter of fact, where I think to myself, okay, what next? What's ahead? The difference between this lady here and that one there is that I feel like anything is possible now.
Right.
And I have people around me that help me remember that when I forget, and I do. And I can't stress that enough. Like, I didn't arrive. I haven't arrived. And then all of a sudden I have, no need for my own inner work. So I keep a team of people around me that do amazing things to keep me boosted. But yeah, I look at my life now with possibility and potential, and I didn't before.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
You are worthy. You found your worthiness.
Yes.
And I know you're still seeking, you're still searching, but no one can take it from you.
No. And part of that, Joe, you get it. I mean, you're an entrepreneur too, right? Like, we might have this feeling of worthiness for a minute, but then we're always on to the next, what's next? What are we going to build next?
Well, I'm still working in the building what I started 17 years ago.
Doing a great job, Joe.
But you know what? But talk about the journey. I mean, I started in advertising, that turned into marketing, right? And then you create this tool to try to understand my stepson, and it turns into a business tool because I'm in business. And they're like, well, teach us this stuff. And now we're an organizational health company. So I feel like we're like a 22-year-old startup.
I love it.
Because it's not like we've been doing this the whole time. I was off doing these little flitty things while the whole team was doing marketing, trying to figure this out. And then, then you pivot. So I say, really? I mean, seriously, if we were to say, how do we, our economic engine funded by this type of work, 2 years? Really?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Like, this is 98% of our work is this. I mean, some marketing we still kind of hang out there and do and help these wonderful people. But yeah, it's evolution. It's evolving, stepping into who you really are and what you can really contribute to the world. And then I get to meet wonderful people like you. I never met wonderful people like you in marketing. Not that they weren't wonderful. It's just there was no reason to reach out.
If you knock the marketers, they will find you and they come for you, Joe.
Hey, listen, I was one. All right, I was one. And I enjoyed it and I loved it. But you know what? The only reason I loved it is because of Dave Scogan, who believed in me.
Right.
Had the grocery store, and all of a sudden, produce is fascinating. Meat is fascinating. Right? When someone believes in you, all of a sudden, it's just like fascinating.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It is. And I think it's interesting. I mean, even your own business, if you look at that, like, I think it's interesting to be a person too who can be a little bit responsive. I always tell people I'm not like a goal setter. Like, if you ask me what my 5-year plan is, I can't probably tell you that. But I can tell you that wherever I am in 5 years will be because I walked to the end of this road and I waited for some higher sense of, I call it spirit, some people call it universe, some people call it God, whatever you call it, but I wait to be told and shown, and I am, and I always am. And I think that's evident in your business too, right? Like,
yes.
If 22 years ago, if you had said where you'd be sitting today, maybe that wouldn't have been something you could have even dreamed up in your wildest dreams.
No way. That's the fun country way. We're the airplane. We fly around with inspiration in our top 5, right? We're waiting to be inspired. And when we're not inspired, we look for other ways to be more inspired.
That's right.
That's our path. That's the flame, right? The few people can understand that we have to be inspired or this isn't worth doing.
That's right. That's right.
So I've been inspired just talking with you and getting to know you, Megan. I've just been overjoyed. With just your energy and your light, your candor, and just your authenticity. I just want you to know that this has been more meaningful than, not to discard any of the other folks, wonderful people I've met, but I just feel wonderful when I'm just connecting with you, like you're an old friend.
Thanks, Joe. I received that, and the feeling is definitely mutual.
And we're Midwesterners.
I really appreciate your time.
That's your Midwesterner heart.
That's it. We're just better people.
So is there any, as we come to an end here, is there any closing thoughts that you can leave on the hearts of people listening who are like, she did this, huh? You know, any other closing thoughts or of encouragement you can give folks who might be struggling?
I would just tell them that they can too. I don't really, I try to avoid the trite sayings like nothing is impossible and all that, because the fact of the matter is some stuff kind of is. But if we can look at our lives as just being really centered and really present in where we're at right now, and then just look for the next indicated thing and start doing those things, then we're going to start to dream. And I say this a lot, especially for people who know me well, but you don't get dreams that don't belong to you. You don't get visions that don't belong to you. So if you have it, you have within you everything you need to make that happen. And your only task is to just trust that and then move with it. And I am living proof that you will be delighted by the results of that. I really mean that.
Well, that is awesome. Jean Sartre, if that's how you say his name, the guy from France who wrote a bunch of cool stuff. He said freedom is doing something with what's been done to you.
Yeah.
And you are a living example of that, as all mother buckers are, and the rest of us too. The things that we walk through and learn, and push through. So, thank you, Megan, for being with us here today, and I just love your message. And to everyone else who's listened in, I'm sure you're as inspired and fired up as I am. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Dignity Dialogue, and we'll send out another episode in approximately 30 days. Have a great month, everyone.
This has been the Dignity Dialogue with Joe Kittinger. Talk at you later.